The hype is real on Rocky Top, helping us break down the Tennessee Volunteers heading into 2024 college football season. Caleb Mitchell of More Important Issues. Those guys do a fantastic job covering all things Tennessee, and not just football, baseball, basketball, whatever you need. But Caleb Mitchell, More Important Issues. He joins the show. Caleb, what's going on, my man? Appreciate you taking the time.
No, thank you for having me on. And you said I'm going to help break it down. People may leave and go, I have more questions than answers, but maybe they'll also learn some fun facts about some guys or something weird. But if we're talking football, that's not necessarily my repertoire, but I try my best, and I can go with the best of them on the message boards. So, take that what you will. And we'll try. That's the point.
That's all we can ask for, right? It's fall camp for everybody, we can say. We're all
Absolutely.
figuring it out as we go along. Caleb, before we look ahead of this 2024 season, let's quickly reflect on year 3 of Josh Heupel. 9-4 with the bowl win over Iowa, but an 8-4 regular season, 4-4 in SEC play. This is coming off of obviously the 11-win season in 2022. Joe Milton's season, very up and down at the quarterback spot. When you look back on it, when Tennessee fans look back on year 3, because we hear it all the time, right, Caleb? Like year 3 is so pivotal for a head coach. You figure out what you got. Now, I think Josh Heupel sort of established that already in year 2, but still, it's always a big year. When you look back at year 3 of Josh Heupel, like and the fan base, what's the big takeaway from the 2023 season? How do folks look back on 2023?
I don't know what the consensus is. I would say the feeling is that Tennessee took at least enough of a step forward to keep things rolling. I certainly didn't take a step back. There were still some disappointments in there. Not that I think Tennessee should have beat Alabama, but when you look at the way that game went in the second half, you're going, you had a chance. Missouri, when you look back, you're going, that's not as bad of a loss as it felt like in the moment, but you don't want to drop that one on the road. So it had its disappointing moments, but then you get flashes of Joe Milton, who's a freak athlete, and maybe got better under Heupel. I don't know. You had Jalen Wright, who was a stud for you, and you also had guys like Brew McCoy go down. You have Kamal Haddon, who performed really well before his injury, go down. So it was kind of full of normal football stuff, but you kind of factor in and how you assess a coach. And honestly, I think for any football coach to have the year Josh Heupel had in year 2, you almost sit down and go, crap, we got to somehow be better than that. And that's tough. Maybe that we'll excuse the South Carolina loss in 2022 that way. We'll say he didn't want to put expectations too high, but I think they took enough of a step forward. I think you built excitement. And honestly, if I'm Josh Heupel, my perfect world, I don't want to start Nico. We've already talked about it. Won't try his last name. I don't want to start him game 1 of his freshman year if I don't have to. So to have a guy that can bridge the gap between a Hendon Hooker and a Nico and Joe Milton, like him or love him, I think was huge. He did the job. There were some big wins mixed in there, wins that don't necessarily get credit to him, like Texas A&M, but he didn't turn the ball over in that game, and Tennessee wins and a defensive struggle. And so I think you bridge the gap, and then you get to cap off the year with a Nico performance against Iowa. So was it an incredible year? Am I going to remember that one for the rest of my life? No, I'm not. But I think you at least didn't take a step back, maybe took a step forward. And I think you're primed to take another step forward. How big? I don't know. Maybe it helps to have an expanded playoff to make it feel like you take a step forward. I think 2023 helped prime you for this year, though.
So, Caleb, like I mentioned, Josh Heupel, the leader of all this, entering his 4th season. What's the vibe like around Knoxville regarding Josh Heupel, where this program is, where it's going? I mean, I'd have to imagine the approval rating is pretty darn high, but as we know, in the SEC, it's high pressure. At a place like Tennessee, they expect to win at a high level. So, again, approval rating's high. This is an important year. But overall, right now, what's your sense of the way Tennessee fans feel about their head coach?
Sure, and it's vastly different than December, right? You're coming off a 9-3 season that people are saying you could have won that game, you could have won this game, you could have won this game by more, or whatever fans rate it as. December, you're not as excited about Josh Heupel. There's no one calling for his head, but maybe you're starting to kind of look around at who's available in year 3 or 4 if things are go to crap. Then you have Nico performing the way he did in the bowl game. Then you have this offseason and the way he's loaded up. Yeah, the 2025 class, but started on the 2026 class now. And that's kind of the beauty, I guess, of college sports is you can change the trajectory of your job position. And for things that don't have to do with what you're about to do on the field or have done on the field. And so his approval rating right now is at an all-time high. Now, will it be the same way after Charlotte, September 6th, to be determined? But I don't know if it's got to be 100. I don't think you could poll a fan that would say they're disappointed. If they are, that's just a Tennessee fan for you. I mean, it is what it is.
Now, Caleb, as we dive into the Volunteers in 2024, let's start on the offensive side of the football. Nico Iamaleava. See, I can't even pronounce it. Iamaleava. See, Iamaleava.
It's better than Kirk Herbstreit's on college football 25.
What did Kirk say? What did Kirk say?
I don't know if I can mispronounce it, how badly he mispronounces it. It sounds like he's almost doing it on purpose. It's impressive.
Iamaleava. Nico Iamaleava.
Yeah.
I have worked on that because listen, Caleb. I've gotten so much feedback from Tennessee fans, not just on that, mispronouncing that name, saying Vols wrong, saying Vols instead of Vols.
Yeah, that's common.
They hate that. That's a bad one. So Nico Iamaleava. See, I'm still mispronouncing it.
To be fair, you are close enough. I don't know if either of those were perfect, but they're close enough that I'm not gonna disparage you for that one.
It's that Malay that gets me.
Yeah,
Nico Iamaleava. It's almost like you have to pronounce it in like 3 separate words. Either way, Tennessee's got a hell of a quarterback. Nico taking over as QB1. Brew McCoy is back from injury. We've seen him running around at fall camp. That's a huge boost. Squirrel White's back. You get the Tulane transfer, Chris Brazel, who I know we're really high on. He's looking to emerge. Dante Thornton Jr.'s back. You add freshman Mike Matthews, Braylon Staley. The theme here is Tennessee's loaded at wide receiver. Notre Dame transfer tight end Holden Stays is added this year as well to the group of weapons. Dylan Sampson leading the way at RB1. There are some questions with depth, but Sampson's a really good place to start. And then offensive line, 3 of 5 are back in that group. Cooper Mays, the real anchor. He's got to stay healthy. The offensive line looked different when he went out last year. Yeah. You did also add LSU transfer Lance Hurd, which is going to be a big-time impact guy. So all in all, with all that being said, Caleb, whether you can pronounce the quarterback's name or not, you're going to be hearing his name a lot. There's going to be a lot of announcers, by the way, that are put to the test when they're talking about him scoring touchdowns, calling out his name. What are you expecting from Nico, this entire offense? What type of fireworks are we looking for in year 4 of Josh Heupel?
Yeah, and that's another thing for the announcers, though. I think you can just go with Nico. I don't think you need the last name.
Just keep it simple. Just keep it simple.
It'll be like a soccer player. You have Ronaldo, you have Messi. You just go with the last name. You'll be fine. Suarez, who's not even, big time player, but not in the 2 names I just mentioned. Nobody knows his first name. My expectations for Nico are probably a little bit more limited than most. I think the big name of the game is protect the football. Do not play outside of what you can. I think he's really talented. And if you look at that Iowa game, plays a top level defense. I'm not sure what all they were missing in that bowl game off the top of my head, but obviously not what they were throughout the season. But I think the name of the game is protect the football. Your defense is what your defense is at this point. And so you have to set your team up in a position to be successful. I think Josh Heupel's offense does a good job of giving you big play opportunities. No need to create them yourself. Don't force it. You don't have to. You're going to get an early taste of that against NC State. Believe they led the ACC with 17 interceptions. I think they returned most of that secondary. So you're going to get an early sense of, can this guy protect the football? And so I think he's better than Joe at that. I don't know if he's as good as Hendon Hooker at that. Joe could throw himself out of trouble. No one's catching a 60-yard bomb on a go route. That's not getting intercepted, but still threw some balls that were ill-advised. So I'm looking for, can this guy limit the turnovers? Obviously fumbles aren't all on him. It's a lot of things that go into that. But I think if he can protect the football, take the big plays when they come, he'll be fine. The kid's got an arm. I think he throws just a better ball, especially outside the hashes, than Joe Milton. And part of that is, and I'm a guy that I'm not going to call out a quarterback for drops, but just being honest about it, it's easier to catch some balls than others. And when you have a guy throwing a ball in 95 miles per hour at you, it is tough, but you got to do it. But I do think he throws a more catchable ball. So no excuses this year if we're dropping stuff. I don't think you'll see as much of it. So take what the defense gives you, and I think he'll be successful at that. Hit on the big plays. I think you're going to see more work with the quarterback using his feet this year than he did last year, which is, when you look at him, you go, Joe Milton's way more athletic. He could probably run the ball better. He just didn't necessarily want to. The part of that is if I could throw the ball that hard and that far, I would want to throw it all the time. And I get that. But Nico is willing to tuck it and run it. 3 rushing touchdowns against Iowa, I believe. He'll do it. I think a lot of people expect big things out of his arm. I think it's going to be less than you expect, but I think he'll wow you in many other ways, probably with games he wins.
Mm-hmm. Looking on the defensive side, Caleb, this is one of the reasons why folks are so excited about this Tennessee team. James Pierce Jr. returns as arguably the best defensive player in college football. Tennessee, these stats stuck out to me. I didn't realize this. Led the SEC last year in tackles for loss, and they were second in sacks a season ago. So just goes to show that progression on the defensive side. Again, Pierce Jr.'s back. Amari Thomas, Bryson Eason are all returning up front. Keenan Peely, Arian Carter, man, the linebacker spots. They're going to be their leaders there. Mm-hmm. Tennessee did lose 10 defensive backs from a season ago, 7 to the portal, 3 to the NFL draft. You got a brand new secondary, essentially, but you did pick up Jermod McCoy from Oregon State, Jalen McMurray from Temple. Those are both at the corner spots. Jacoby Thomas from Middle Tennessee State at safety. They all come from the portal. And the big question, as it feels like it is every year, Caleb, is the secondary. The front 7 is what's got people excited. Can the secondary be good enough? Because it's been an Achilles heel for Tennessee before. So when you look at this defense, what are you expecting? Front 7 really good. Secondary, some questions. What does it mean for Tennessee defensively this year?
Yeah, and I was going to say this without knowing. I didn't realize we were second in sacks in the SEC. I hadn't seen that stat, didn't realize it. I was going to say your front 7 is going to be one of the best in the SEC. Mm-hmm. Your linebacking group gets older. A lot of those young guys had to play last year, Arian Carter specifically. He's going to bring a ton to you. Keenan Peely, we don't know what he was going to give you in the SEC. He looked really good against Virginia. Take that. I don't know. I don't know if you can really fully say that was going to tell the story, but I think he's going to provide a lot, if not anything, just being a veteran, knowing where to go, knowing what to do. So your front 7, that's without mentioning James Pierce Jr., Amari Thomas, Omar Norman-Lott, who had to fight through some injury last year. One of the better front 7 in the SEC, which means the country, like we know. Man, that secondary, it's scary. That is something I kind of want to see him play now just so I can have a feel for what it's going to do. You probably have a freshman who's very, very athletic, and Boo Carter starting at that star position. You had Jordan Thomas. He's now out for the season. He was going to be your starter there. So probably a true freshman starting in the middle of the field in the SEC. I don't know what he's weighed in at since getting on campus, but probably going to look out of place there for at least a few games. The secondaries, it's terrifying. And I mean, Jermod McCoy, that's a big pickup. I think that helps a lot, but then you go into depth and we'll see what it is. And I have questions with how they play. Will they give these guys the opportunities to make plays? Will they force them to just kind of play safe and keep everything in front of them, which is good and great. Not on 3rd and 8 playing 10 yards off the ball. It's not great. So I have a lot of questions there, and I don't know how much your front 7 can erase. That's my biggest question.
Caleb, moving to special teams. Josh Turbeville replaces Charles Campbell at kicker. Jackson Ross is back as your punter. You do have to replace D. Williams as your punt returner, one of your main kick returners. Anything notable for Tennessee on the special teams side of things? Because obviously when you're trying to win as many as you can, maybe get to 10, maybe get to 11, get to a playoff. If you can steal a win with special teams, it's a big deal. So anything to be excited about when it comes to Volunteers specialists this year?
Maybe. I know you watch, obviously, a lot of games. I don't know how much with volume, so I don't know if you hear him talk about it or if you picked up on this. Did you know that Jackson Ross punts? He's ambidextrous.
Both legs, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
He uses them both. But he's better. God, I'm blanking on it now.
That's impressive alone, though. That's
it is, but
alone.
and they use it to try to get it in the coffin corners, and they use it against the hash marks and try to make return teams do something different. But I can't remember which one it is now off the top of my head. He's, in my opinion, noticeably better with one foot. He's really, really good. He's talented. They do a lot of times you'll see rugby style punters only punt that way. Or guys that don't, they're just going to punt how you normally line up. He's really versatile, which allows punt teams to do different things with whatever down and distance and then position on the field calls for. I'm a big special teams guy, kicker at heart. Punt team is that is where the game is completely changed, especially in the SEC when you talk about field position. I think Jackson Ross is a weapon, which you don't get to call punters that normally. We'll see how he had a great freshman year. We'll see how that works out. Surely you think in a second year a punter gets better, but you don't bank on anything in SEC football, especially, which he's older. I can't remember. He came from Australia. I can't remember how old he is. So maybe you don't have those kids getting distracted for whatever reason happen with him. But he's a weapon. Josh Turbeville's really talented. I think, I don't know if anything super special about him, but yeah, Jackson Ross is where that games could be won.
So Caleb,
is that true anymore? That's my question. Like, when's the last time we've seen a team really win a field position battle in the SEC?
That's a great question. I mean, I know South Carolina leans on special teams very heavily.
There are a lot of those.
There aren't. I mean,
fakes.
Admittedly, there aren't many really good teams that special teams is a priority. I mean, they're not bad at it, but you know what I mean. Like, if you're leaning on special teams to win ball games, it's probably because your offense and/or your defense is struggling. Like that, you know what I mean? I just to be transparent. But to your point, you don't know the value of a great punter and kicker until you don't have one. Right.
Or until you have a really good punter that can flip field positions for you in needed situations. But
like, for example, Tennessee used to have the Colquitts, it was a factory, and they were, killing people with the punters. So
you didn't have the quarterbacks then in the SEC that you do now that can flip field position on you in a second, in a heartbeat. So I don't know how critical it is unless you're talking about pinning people inside the 5. Pinning them inside the 20 is almost a useless stat now. How much does it really do? So as I talk about that, I'm thinking back to how I learned football, and I'm like, I don't know how relevant that really is. But obviously, you also see a punt return, even if it's not for a touchdown, a punt return that flips the field in your favor is huge, and maybe a punter, at least a good punter, allows that to not happen as much. But yeah, as I started talking about that, I don't know how much that really matters. So again, you can forget all that information.
So Caleb, 8 starters are back for Tennessee, 5 on offense, 3 on defense. As we take a look at the 2024 schedule, an interesting slate, no doubt. Open up with Chattanooga, non-conference, no big deal. Like you mentioned, week 2 against NC State in Charlotte, night game there. NC State has the 4th best odds to win the ACC. This is one of the more underrated, I think, early non-conference matchups of this season. You then Kent State at home. You go to Oklahoma to open SEC play. A lot of subplots there. Josh Heupel going back to Norman, a place where he won the national title as a quarterback. That'll be a fun game at Arkansas. Then you got Florida at home. Big-time revenge spot. Who can forget what happened last year in the swamp? Alabama at home will be a crazy environment. Kentucky at home, Mississippi State at home. So you've got 4 straight home games through the month of October and early November. Then you close out Georgia, UTEP, and at Vandy. Caleb, when you take a look at this 2024 slate, year 4 of Josh Heupel, a Tennessee team looking to make the college football playoff, what stands out to you about this 24 schedule?
The two biggest ones, and I'll start with the one that just chronologically hits first, and that's NC State. We can call Nico's first start at Iowa his first start because it is, but his first real start is going to be NC State at a neutral site game. Iowa's a bowl game. We know how those kind of work out now. Chattanooga, that's just a go in there, take care of business. Let's run the starters for 2 quarters and a drive and get them out of there. NC State is a test that I think everyone is unaccustomed to, and I think that's the biggest thing. They bring in they lose a lot, but they bring in a lot of transfers that should help them out. Grayson McCall being the most notable. Duke running back also, blanking on his name right now, brought him in. They do lose a starting linebacker that was a stud that they'll have to replace as well. But that's a test that is going to tell you a ton about this team. That's the first one out of the gate. Then go to Oklahoma, which I think is obviously, when you look at the season, that's the biggest telltale sign. You can play well at NC State, win it, and Oklahoma can be a different story. If you look at Josh Heupel, we talked about the 2022 South Carolina game, talked about the 2023 Missouri game. There's some other notable ones in there too that his team doesn't play well on the road. I don't know if it has to do, both those are night games, the two I mentioned. I don't know if it's one of those you sit in a hotel room for 12 hours and then you got to go play football, because when you look at LSU, to 11 a.m. kickoff local time, and they go out and take care of business and run them out of their own stadium. And so Oklahoma is an interesting one, because you mentioned all the storylines that are going to obviously be there with Josh Heupel. Then you have, can this team play on the road, especially if it's a flex game at night, if it ends up being a night game. And I think that's a telltale sign. I don't necessarily think you have to win Oklahoma for the season to be successful. You have a lot of games left ahead of you, but that will be a really good earmark to say, go back to, and you're going to go, yeah, that dictated their season.
Caleb, I want to go back to the offensive side real quick. We talked about Nico, obviously, but let's discuss some of the other weapons. Like I mentioned, the wide receiver room, super loaded. Adding Holden Stays at tight end was a big deal. You know, the offensive line with Cooper Mays. Just your thoughts on Nico is so important. He's going to get all the attention. People are kind of, you know, they're putting all their eggs in the Nico basket. The Nico for Heisman campaign's already starting to run. But, like, his success, a lot of it is going to be dictated by all these weapons around him and the offensive line. Just your thoughts on the supporting cast he has to work with.
Yeah, and that's just the nature of football now, is if the quarterback's the most important position on the field. Not that it's not always been, but
he gets too much credit and too much blame.
Right. And it's just the nature of the sport that you have now. But he does have a ton of help around him, a ton of weapons. The biggest one I think he's going to lean on, especially through these early games, is going to be Cooper Mays, who you mentioned. That guy is the linchpin to how this team performs, especially early on. He's the guy that's making the calls at the line of scrimmage. That's going to help a freshman quarterback out. He's been there for redshirt freshman, excuse me. He's been around. He knows how it's done. He knows what Josh Heupel wants to do. He's a guy he's going to have to lean on, and keeping him healthy throughout the season, but especially in the early going, is going to be huge for him. When you look at the other, there's so many weapons for him. I mean, it's a good setup. If this is your first year you're starting, you can't really complain. Obviously, you'd like to have more depth in the running back room. Kind of looking at Cam Seldon, will he be full go as the season progresses? A guy that was injured all of spring practice. You do have a really talented RB1 in Dylan Sampson. You hope Deshaun Bishop has come along. But you have some other guys in that room, freshman and Peyton Lewis, who a lot of people have been impressed with in fall camp, which, you know, isn't everybody impressed with everybody in fall camp? You don't hear much negatives come out. But ton of help in that running back room. And then you also have your receiver room. And if Brew McCoy is healthy early on, I think that's the biggest thing that Nico needs and could use. A guy that goes down, and this is my probably hottest take of the 2023 season. I don't know how Tennessee does the rest of the way. I think Tennessee beats Alabama if Brew McCoy's healthy. I think you have a receiver you can go to in the second half, and you don't kind of abandon how you built your team and what you do. And that's obviously a credit to Alabama making Tennessee do that. But I think if you have a guy, Brew McCoy, that you can go to in second and longs, third down situations, that you feel is going to go and win the football no matter where that ball's thrown, you take more chances. And so Nico having that guy is huge. We'll see how that relationship, obviously we haven't seen them play together, but see how that kind of plays out. But he's the biggest person in the receiver room for a quarterback. I mean, ton of talent there. Squirrel White, I'm excited to see get an opportunity. Flashed as a freshman, playing with that second group, but had a really, really good season last year as well. Dante Thornton kind of came along, then got injured. See what he does coming out the gate. Mike Matthews, a freshman. Brazel, I think a ton of people are excited for, and rightfully so. And then there's a Caleb Webb and Chaz Nimrod, who flashed too when they needed it due to injury last year. And I think if you've watched Tennessee a lot, you see 3 wide receivers. That's pretty much all Josh Heupel plays. If that's by choice, we'll find out this season, because I think he's got 6 guys that can play at impactful levels in the SEC. So we'll find out if 3 receivers is by choice or not.
So, Caleb, the question is this: when it comes to Tennessee Volunteers in 2024, does this team have the makings of a college football playoff contender? And in your mind, what needs to click for that to happen? Because, again, with a 12-team college football playoff, with Nico taking over the reins, with the way Josh Heupel's building, what was it, 7 wins in year 1, 11 in year 2, 9 in year 3, the new expectations kind of become for Tennessee to be around that double-digit win mark. So, again, in your mind, does this team have the makings of a college football playoff contender? And what needs to click for Tennessee to get to that 10-win mark?
I would say, try to be realistic about this. I would say Tennessee's right on that line of a college football playoff contender. I think they're sitting somewhere around 9-3, and that may or may not get you in, depending on how the rest of the schedule or the rest of the country shakes out, depending on what your strength of schedule looks like at the end of the year. 9-3 could sneak you in at 11-12 when you look at the top 12 teams last year. So I'm going to put them right on that line. Obviously, if they go 10-2, they get in, and I think that's doable. I think the biggest thing that has to click is it's going to be how good's Nico? And I don't know how you want to define that, because if the kid can come out, if he throws an interception a game, but also throws 3 touchdowns, you're probably winning. If he can protect the football, throw for 2, rush for 1, I don't know, or throw for 2, and then your running backs can have a couple of touchdowns, you're probably okay too. A lot of that obviously relies on the defense. That's why it's hard, because we don't know enough about Nico. I think that's the biggest thing. If this offense looks like it's clicking like it was in 2022, you can kind of let the defense do what they're going to do. You know what you have in your front 7, so let them do what they're going to do. So I think the biggest thing is Nico as advertised, and that'll tell the story of if Tennessee will be in the college football playoff, which I don't blame fans for having that expectation, because with 12 teams, it's really possible.
Caleb, we'll end the conversation with this, and I'm going to try to pronounce it one more time. Nico Iamaleava, which that's close enough. I'm going to roll with that. But in all seriousness, again, we've seen the Nico for Heisman stuff. I joke, but how good can this kid be? Because we've heard about the hype. We saw him in the bowl game. Granted, it's a bowl game, but it was against Iowa's defense. We saw him fit the football into some tight windows. We saw him use the legs. We've heard about the $8 million man, if you will, in Knoxville, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. So how good can this kid be in your mind?
When you look at this receiving group that he has,
I'm not just talking this year. I'm talking his entire career.
Right.
What's the ceiling for this kid at Tennessee?
I think the ceiling's above what you saw. And I think a good indication of what you're going to get this year, you look at 2022 Hendon Hooker, I think you're getting at least 85-90% of that at the bare minimum. I think he's much more talented than Hendon Hooker, but you also had Hendon Hooker, who was a seasoned vet, who'd been there before, who'd gotten a season in 2021 mostly under his belt. But I think when you look at the talent and when you look at being able to play in this system but not be feet held to the fire kind of deal as a starter, as a true freshman, I think when you look at all those factors this season, you look at Hendon Hooker in 2022, and I think you're getting a lot of that. If not, his ceiling's more, in my opinion, but I think that's your floor. I think his ceiling is a guy that contends for the Heisman Trophy. I don't think that putting a Heisman Trophy on him is insane, in my opinion, because so many things can happen. Guys can play better. Your season cannot be as good no matter how good you play. You're not going to be in that conversation unless your team's at the top, or near the top, I should say. So I think a lot of things can certainly not go in his favor, but I think this guy is a name that, if he's not in New York, he's right there on the cusp by the end of his career. Maybe 2 years would be, I think, probably his ceiling is being there in New York 2 years.
Exciting times on Rocky Top indeed. Caleb, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. Let folks know where they can check out all your work with More Important Issues.
Yeah, make sure you follow us on Twitter at @more_issues. That's the place we do all our stuff. But there's also a link to our link tree that'll send you to our Instagram. We've got some exciting stuff on YouTube coming out. I'm going to call it golf content. Please don't hold the golf against us. We've gotten national champion Xander Seacrest on. He got out on the course with us for our newest kind of venture there, calling it The Turn. We just had Redmond Walsh on last night, so that video will be dropping soon, and we've got a couple more people lined up that we're really excited for. Right now, it's a lot of all baseball guys. We're still riding that national championship high, so that's just how it goes.
Caleb Mitchell, more important issues. You would land and do a great job. Y'all keep up the work, and we'll definitely do this again soon.
Hey, I appreciate it and appreciate you having me on. Have a good night.